Welcome back to Get Real with Jack and Cindy. I'm Cindy Morrison.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jack Wallace. Glad you're back with us.
Episode 11.
Wow.
We're on a roll.
We are. Yeah. So it's interesting. And you know what? We really do want to make sure we're doing what you guys want. So if there's something that you would like us to discuss, please let us know. We'd love to do that. So.
Absolutely. And a lot of times we'll just literally rip it from the headlines or from our sales meetings, but definitely we want to know what you are interested in knowing.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm interested in knowing when it's going to quit raining.
Yeah, rain. And more, you can tell by my hair. It's
my yard looks good though. That's a good news.
I went out and did a Facebook Live because I had open houses right beside each other.
Uh-huh.
So as I walked from one house to the other, I was like, I should really have an umbrella, because by the end of this Facebook Live, I'm gonna be looking a little
just
ratchet.
Shows people you will go the distance.
Well, today we're going to talk about building generational wealth, building wealth, but also generational wealth. Now, what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, especially in reference to real estate, you know, when you think about, I've had so many friends whose parents did well, but they weren't necessarily, wealthy people. But when they passed away, their house was paid for, and they left the house to the children.
Yep.
And that was a really nice thing for them. And then I've known other people whose parents had lots of rental property, lots of assets, and it was a very big deal for their children. And so I think, for yourself, it's a really great thing to have that income, to have that appreciation, to be able to cash out, sell things as you want to when you get older, if that's what you want to do, or if you want to keep that money rolling and pass that on to it. So I think that's where I see it when it comes to real estate. We always think of wealth as being people that have made lots and lots of money in their profession, and I think that isn't always how it happens. People really do it through building rental property fleets and leveraging that. So,
and I wish I'd realized that when I was younger, because my mother did real estate. Not only did she sell it, but she also, every time her family would move, they would keep that house and then invest in a new one. So at one point she had more than a dozen properties over probably 4 states. And I remember her saying something about, wouldn't you like for me to pass this on to you? And I'm like, oh, sell it. I'll never be involved in real estate. Famous last words now for 7 years.
No, I think that's a really important, because I grew up with parents who had rental property and still do. And I think that there is sort of that thing when you watch your parents are always on call for broken toilets and people complaining about this. And, I think it does make you kind of like, oh, I don't want to do, like anything.
Yeah.
But then you also get older and you start looking and you go, wow, look at what they've been able to do in their life, where they are, what they're not having to worry about like other people.
Absolutely.
So I think especially, I think it starts really showing up, in your 50s, 60s. It kind of shows up what you've done with all those things. And it's an incredible thing to have those assets. I also think that it's really important, and that's what that the concept of the difference, we've talked about it before, between wealth and riches. Riches are the things that we all love, the cars, the belts, the purses, the jewelry,
all the fun things,
and that you work hard to have those things. But if you don't have wealth and riches, then those riches really are misrepresentation of the game you've been playing.
Yep.
And
they could go away at any minute. At least if you buy dirt, that dirt's always going to be there. You're
Absolutely.
You're buying your place on this planet.
And if you don't want to do real estate, there are real estate investment trusts. There's all kinds of ways to do it. We sell real estate, so of course we think you should do real estate, but stocks and bonds, those are a great way. I also think sometimes it's good to start in doing some stocks and bonds, take some of that cash and diversify out and buy real estate, because if everything is in the stock market and the bond market and the economy tanks, the one thing that happens when the economy tanks is that, like you said, the dirt is always going to stay in place, but those companies can go away.
Yep. In fact, we're going to talk about the top 10 ways that we feel like that this will build generational wealth for you, and maybe, your kids on down the line. So first is capital appreciation, that ROI, return on investment.
Yeah. So, it's an interesting thing because people don't think about return on investment when it comes to their home. But if you think in terms of your return on your investment of whether you're paying rent or you're your own landlord, and that's the thing to remember. If you buy a house and you live in it, that basically you are your own landlord. So all the money you're paying towards your mortgage is what you would have been paying to a landlord. Now, I will say, I am not someone who believes that if you do not have money saved for emergencies, that you should jump in at any cost and just buy a house. I think
Right.
probably you should do it sooner than you think, but a lot of people put themselves in the idea that it's cheaper to rent, or what is that? Cheaper to own than to rent because you're not throwing money away is true eventually. But if you can't afford to fix the dishwasher or pay the insurance if the roof has an issue, then having a landlord for a while you save money or start in the stock market could be a good thing.
That's what my son's doing in Dallas. He can't afford to buy. He lives in Lower Greenville, Upper Greenville, Lower Uptown, Lower Greenville. There we go. And it's just out of his budget. So he's just stocking, keeping money back. So eventually he can do that. But also it's the same, not even just your house, but any real estate that you buy, it appreciates. You buy a car, it's worth less the moment you drive it off the market.
Sorry.
I know my husband's like, did you have to use the car example? But there are many things that we buy depreciate right after you buy them. But homes, real estate traditionally has appreciated. Well, especially here in Tulsa since 2020, the average home has increased by $100,000. Generally, you have to stay in a home, 7, 10 years.
A very unusual jump. But again, you want to be in the market. It's kind of like in the regular stock market. Most people, when they do studies about how people have made money in the stock market over the course of, like, say 20 years or 30 years, there's usually 10 or 15 days that were big days that they actually made, and they made a lot of money on those days. And that it shows that if they had been out of the market, they would have lost money, but because they were in the market on those particular days, that their money went through the roof and increased. So it's kind of the same thing. It's like, if you don't buy the house, everyone keeps putting that, not everybody, every realtor keeps not everybody is as obsessed with it as we are, but they put on the what interest rates were in 1979 or 72, and then if you waited for interest rates to go down, you would have waited 20 some years, and the houses have appreciated a large amount in that time period. You would have missed that gap. So it's kind of the same thing. Like, you have those periods of time where the market just jumps up, and also it's just basic inflation. The natural rate of inflation for houses is 3%. So in Tulsa, we forever were about a 3% appreciation every year, and California would bubble up and New York would bubble up, and then Tulsa just wouldn't get hit that hard because houses were just kind of naturally doing that. And then COVID happened, or whatever
and
happened.
Everyone lost their minds over real estate, but interest rates did that.
And Tulsa caught up. I think we didn't catch up to the level. We still haven't caught up as far as the prices, which is, thank God, for a lot of people. But, with new construction, with everything had to come up, and it did. And now that everybody's sitting on, not everybody, half the population is sitting on 3% interest rates or under, then they're not giving up their house. So the inventory is staying low because they don't want to put their house in the market right now. There are reasons they will have to put their house in the market. And we're starting to see that happening more. But for a while, it's been very low inventory, and the demand has been pretty high. So
inventory is picking up, but it's not nearly where it has been other years in May.
Sure. And that's that basic supply and demand. And so when it comes to values, it's all based on supply and demand. And if the supply is low and the demand is high, prices go up. So even though right now a lot of people feel like prices should be going down, they're just sort of staying where they are. Or you're seeing some people doing some discounting, but for the most part, they're staying pretty steady.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and a second way that this can really help you is rental money.
Yeah.
Just having that money that is coming in every month.
Yeah. And again, landlording is not for everybody. You have to kind of have systems, and you have to have patience and maybe some skills to do it. Or the other side of it is you have to work on kind of the economy of scale, where you buy enough properties that you can have systems in place that pay for themselves and do that. So I think that's really important part. Not everybody should be a landlord,
Right.
It's and not every property is going to be easy to maintain and rent. So there's a lot of factors that go into that, but it's an incredible way to build your net worth. I think it's also you can do that where you put 10% down and you put 15% down on one property, and then you start putting it into your rental, and you charge the rental, and then you pay your mortgage, and you have a cash flow, and then you do it again. To be careful with leveraging and over leveraging, and make sure you have, again, money to do repairs, money if you have 2 months where someone isn't renting it.
Yep.
If somebody comes in and destroys the property for the most part and you have to rebuild it. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that. But in general, rental is amazing because you can use the ladder and leverage up and then build systems. So.
Yep. And you talked about skills. I think a lot of the skills that you have as a landlord are soft skills that you can learn. And you don't have to go it alone. I mean, you can go on a thing called Google and actually look at what are some systems for managing these properties.
Absolutely.
And there's no reason to reinvent the wheel and make it harder than it is.
And if you have enough money to do it, there's nothing wrong with making less money and having someone manage your properties. Even that's a very legitimate thing for some people. You definitely they're not going to do it the way you would do it. You're not going to have as much attention paid to them as you would pay to them. But if you're not somebody that's a good thing for, that is an option. You just have to remember that you've got to have a higher rate of return on your investment, because you're going to be paying somebody, a pretty good fee. I mean, they deserve it.
Yeah.
To do that and to manage it.
All right. Third is leverage when
Which
it comes to.
I kind of jumped the gun. That was kind of what
yeah, but we got a theme going here.
Yeah. Or like you said, actually, it's also like your mom. Whenever, like, I think that's what's going to happen a lot right now with people that have a 3% interest rate. They're just not going to sell that house. They'll keep that mortgage and then they'll go to the next. I mean, in some ways, we're going to see that leveraging happening just because people are like, I can't ever get that kind of money on this house again. So I'm going to keep this one. I can rent it. I can still have positive cash flow and go to my next. So right now, if you have that low interest rate, that's a really good time to start thinking about leveraging when you want to go up. People are like, I can't because but you build a lot of equity.
Yep.
You're doing so. That's a really good time to leverage that and to use it.
That's great. So, and also the leverage, when you're talking about real estate, you really can make it a small investment and borrow the rest.
Absolutely.
So, that's one of the ways that you can get in if you think, oh, I can't afford a $150,000 house to rent out to people. Well, talk with a lender and see what that looks like on that property.
Well, what does that think if you spend $150,000 in cash for a house, or if you took the $150,000 and you divide it by 15%, then that's 10 houses that you could get mortgages on and pay. Now, again, you need to have money in the bank and be okay with if 2 or 3 of them tank.
Yep.
But I think that is a really great formula and a way to look at it. So yeah.
Another way it helps you build wealth. Number 4 is the tax advantage, the deductions you can take.
Yeah. And it's one of the few that you really get. That's a really good tax deduction, and depending on where you are. I mean, in Oklahoma, we get to write off pretty much all of it, the mortgage insurance and the interest. But if you live in some bigger cities, it's the laws have changed a little bit.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah, there's a big debate kind of between the right and the left, which we aren't going to go into, but
No, we're not.
they've played
We're
with those
purple.
numbers, and they play with those numbers, and so in some markets it's like what used to be you straight across right off. Now you have a limit. So, but here pretty much you get to write it all off. So
Yeah.
it's pretty good.
The inflation hedge.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So let's just think about it. If we bought a house in I graduated high school in 1984. So let's say I graduated from high school,
We graduated the same year.
and 4 years later, after I graduated from college in '88, I bought a house. So if I bought a house in '88 and my payment and it was let's say $450. So then for 30 years I kept that.
I'm really impressed you're doing this math in your head, by the way.
So that would have been, think about this. So if in 30 years I'd kept that, then would have been 2015. Up until 2015, I would have been paying $450 a month. Now you're going to have more in your insurance, you have more in your taxes, but that part stays the same, even though the house is valuing. So it's a really good inflation hedge. And then once it's paid off, if you stay there, then you don't have to pay anything. So, but if you're doing rent, if I was paying rent for, imagine 30 years of rent over that time period, the increases, and it wouldn't have been going towards me having the house, buying the house. Yeah, the asset.
All right, next is equity building, talking about the principal.
Well, and that goes back to what I was just saying. So if I've been paying on that every time, it's really hard when you look at it's really hard when you look at a mortgage, when you look at those first years, because you're like, I didn't pay down anything. That's all I got off of my principal, and that's it's really crazy because you're paying so much interest on that large amount, but as that amount keeps coming down, you're paying less interest, and it's more principal. So it flips at some point, and you kind of go over. But the point being that it's really an enforced savings account, because it's forcing you. First of all, you're not paying that money towards rent; you're paying it to yourself. So you can think of that interest rate that you're paying the money is like that could be like your rent, but everything over that and the house valuing is you building equity. So it's a pretty good deal.
Real estate is just thebomb.com. It is. All right.
Control over your investments.
Thank you. Somebody can read my writing, and it's not
right,
me. So
I read hieroglyphics. So the control over investment. So like if you have stocks and bonds, you basically buy them and hold them. You can vote. I mean, you do have like the on not on bonds, but on stocks, you can vote on but little tiny vote on the board, stuff. But when it comes to real estate, you can control whether you add on to it, whether you put a new roof on it,
remodel
whether you improve it, and that's the one thing too, where we're talking about 30 years of appreciation, 30 years of payment. There's 30 years of maintenance, 30 years of updating and upgrading. Those things have to be factored in too. And it's sort of funny because I go with people that have done a whole lot through I'm the worst. I put way too much money in my house. Like I just do because I love my house, and so like
I want to do space.
And to me it's my it's my biggest investment. I mean it's important to me that I keep it the way I want it, and I live there, so I want it to be nice. I don't have a big house, but I have a really nice little house.
I love your house.
So there's that, but then you get to do the improvements, and so like if I ever wanted to add on 500, 600 square feet, the location hasn't changed. So let's say the location has gotten much more popular, which mine has.
Oh yeah, it has.
Yeah, and so if I were to add on 500 square feet, I'm not going to, but if I were going to, I would get that money out of it and more, a lot more.
Absolutely.
So, it's like those kind of things that you have to look at. You can control that investment in a way that when it comes to the stock market, just buying more or selling and trading, that's controlling your input output. That is not controlling the asset.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, number 8, diversification. And that is something that is really important. If you dump all of your eggs into one basket,
Mm-hmm.
if that basket topples over, there goes your money.
Mm-hmm.
So you can diversify it in the kinds of things that you invest in, but also the types of real estate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like, you want to have some stocks, you want to have some bonds, you want to have some real estate. I mean, I think it's really good to have all those different things. The one thing I always think about too is like if you have rental property, having them all in one area is kind of nice because you can kind of have things very centralized in how you take care of them. But if a tornado comes through that area
Hmm.
or something like that, then you can have real devastation to all of your properties. So, even in that, it's good to spread them out a little bit and have that diversification. Um, but I think the biggest thing is that you just have to always be playing the defense game.
Hmm.
And, the one thing again, if the economy goes to pot, people still have to have a place to live.
Right.
I mean, it's just the way it is. That's the one thing I think with real estate. They don't necessarily need the internet to be, the tech stocks and all those things that we all love,
Hmm.
but they're going to need basics. They're going to need food and shelter.
Absolutely. Legacy and estate planning, because real estate is something you can physically pass
Mm-hmm.
down to the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my dogs will be there after me, I guess. No, I think it's such a cool thing because I've had so many friends through the years that were really surprised whenever their parents passed away, and God love them, they took care of their parents at the end. They were there, they sacrificed a lot for them, and then whenever they sold the house or they did, that was a nice little boost for them. And I've had other people that I've known that, their parents built a real dynasty,
Mhm.
and it was passed on to them, and now they've got it and they're passing it on to their kids. I mean, I think it's pretty amazing. I think that the one thing to think about too is it doesn't even necessarily mean your kids. Like, you can leave your assets and you can have them sold and given to a charity. You can
Mhm.
do whatever, whatever's important to you, or you can spend every penny, which is great too. But
Mhm.
it's like, you always want to have enough money to be able to live the way you want to live. And I think that's one great thing too. Like, if you can actually get your house paid off by the time you're in retirement, which is really great if you can,
Mhm.
then that's something you kind of don't have to worry about, and you can put that money towards other things. So all the money you used to spend to your house payment now could go towards your living expenses. So it's a really smart thing in general for your legacy and for that, but it's also a smart thing for your own retirement and planning, estate planning.
Yes. Mom finally sold off the last of her properties before I moved her from Texas to Oklahoma.
Mhm.
But then she was able to turn around and invest that. But she wouldn't have had that if she didn't have those
Yeah.
properties.
And I think that's a really important thing because at a certain point, real estate is a hands-on thing, and
Mhm.
and it's like it's hard to maintain those two arms length.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, you either have family that helps you hire someone who does that for you, or you start selling them off so that you don't have to keep them. So, and either one is good. It really is, because you can transfer those money after 30 years of having those investments and having them, appreciate, and then cashing out, and then having that money, even if it's just sitting in your account,
Mhm.
earning 5%, which, now we can earn 5% in some places. So, for somebody in that situation, that's really worth it,
Right.
you know.
One piece of property she did not sell goes back in our family to statehood. Actually turned around and put that in an LLC
Oh, wow.
so it can continue to go
Right,
to a new board of directors with each generation.
right.
Because my mom's like, we're never getting rid of that. That's something really special to her. That's where her family lived for
And I
generations.
think that's an important point too. Like, in all of this, if you are thinking about estate planning, if you are buying multiple properties, trust LLCs. There's all kinds of ways to do that, to set it up where it doesn't have to go through probate. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to go. I mean, like, it's important to know if you are a married couple. It's very important to have your deed where you have right of survivorship.
Mhm.
Very important. So that if one passes, immediately when they pass, then that goes to you. So then you don't have to deal with having to prove it or fight against it. It's just yours. So that's really important.
And it depends on which state you live in. So, mom was in Texas, and trusts are just not a big thing there. The attorney that we consulted said, okay, put this land in an LLC, and did all the wills and all that. Well, I moved her from Texas to Oklahoma, then wills are important
Isn't that
here.
funny? It is state to state. For
Not
sure.
wills, the trust.
Yeah.
And so then we changed everything over into a trust except for the LLC.
Which is strange, because you would think nationally it'd be one standard or the other, but it really is sort of state to state how that works. So
yeah.
And then people come from another state and try to say, well, this is how it should be done. You really want a local state person to be advising you, because a lawyer from another state, maybe what they want to advise you is what you're trying to accomplish, and then talk to somebody here who knows how the Oklahoma law works or the Texas law works for you.
And that's why I got a referral in Lubbock for a lawyer there, because it is different. So no matter what state you're listening in, check that and see how you can position your real estate to help you the most.
But it's so worth the money to do that, because you can think that everything is set, and then everything goes to court and probate, and everybody starts fighting over it, and then it can be a horrible situation.
It's a great thing about being an only child. I'm it. Well, the last one, and you brought this up earlier in this podcast, and I think they're really two important words: forced savings.
Yeah. I think we all need a little bit of that. I think it's really, it's really easy to get to the end of the month and go, wait, not this month. But if you're making your house payment, that's basically like, priority one, like doing your rent check. What you don't think about is that you're writing a check to yourself. Even if at the beginning it's a small one, you are writing a check to yourself. The other thing to do is to get not so caught up in, oh my gosh, I hardly paid anything down. And because the valuation of the house also is part of that savings. So, but yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, you sacrifice, and some people say, I don't want to be house poor. And I agree with that. You don't want to get to where you have so much house that you can't do anything else, but you also want to have enough of one, I guess, that you do kind of have something at the end. I mean, I will say some of my friends who live other places other than Tulsa, like, they've always been so jealous because of the price of our houses and that we get to live the way we live for the amount we do. But I'm sort of jealous that now they've been paying on those houses and they've got so much equity. Now, if they want to stay where they are, it's not going to spread out very much. But if they want to take that money and run here, they could go a lot further along.
And speaking of equity, a lot of people were saying, oh, this is going to be like the 1980s. We're going to have a big bust again, or 2008, 2009. But people have much more equity in their homes now than they did in the past.
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's also, it's so funny how we always want to go back and what is that? History doesn't repeat, it rhymes. I mean, I think there's some, obviously there are things there's principles and there's things that happen, but this is not like 2008.
No, not at all.
It's not. And and we're not like the inflation. We're not like the 80s. We're just not. It could go that way. I mean, I think, but it's like we're in a different position with oil and gas than we were then. We're in a different position with what people are sitting on. We have a problem with inventory because people are sitting on 3% and 5% or 3.5% to 3% interest rates. We don't have that problem because they can't afford to make their house payment.
Right.
Which is what we were in 2008, because they had
exactly
way overpaid and too high of financing costs, and they were trapped. So we're in very different situations. And, we did have 100-year pandemic.
Yes, I mean, we did. Yeah.
Well, that's fun.
Crazy. You think
let's never do that again. Okay?
Yeah. The last 4 years, craziness.
Yeah. I'm sort of glad I'm not living another 100 years because I don't want to do that again. I'm good. I've done that. I mean, it is kind of crazy now to think about. I was thinking about that the other day. Like, we were just holed up in our house. Like, I mean, I'm not going to lie. There are parts of that I liked. I kind of enjoyed going jogging, making my own lunch, sitting with the dogs and day after day. And then after about 3 weeks, I was like,
Yeah. Gotta go.
Yeah. And in our business, it didn't last 3 weeks.
No.
It was so busy. But again, that's, what is it that happened? That's a really good example, though. What is it that happened whenever everybody got forced to stay home?
Yes.
They wanted something bigger. They wanted
They
something
suddenly
better.
want the
They wanted that.
pool.
Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and if we're going to live like this for a long time, we always think where we are now is how we're always going to be. And we're
Mm-hmm.
all guilty of that. So I think everyone's like, I want
What?
an
Yeah, young and
outdoor.
beautiful? Is that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been either for a while, but happy. That's the good news. No, I think that's where we all kind of tend to be in, and it's like that was what was happening. But I think it's an interesting thing that when the chips are down, people actually want to get more dug into a house
Mm-hmm.
than flee the house.
Yes.
And now people are kind of weird about as much community living as they were. Like people don't want to be as close as they were. We had a lot of people that were in some retirement situations that go, you know what, I don't want to do that anymore. So they started buying houses again. So I mean, it's kind of, you have to really look at that and think houses aren't going away.
No, not anytime soon. So, and I'm like you. I love my house. Like before this TV show, they were coming to shoot at my house for a whole day. So I redid a lot of the things, remodeled that I had been putting off for a little too long. And I do. I love my house. I'd love to go home to my house now.
Yeah, I love it. And I think it's also one of those things, like, I think that's what's so easy for me to sell houses, because when I see people walk in the door, and I always tell people, I know when people are going to write an offer pretty much because they walk in the door. We haven't even seen the house, but they have that energy of I'm home. They literally, and
I just had that the other day. I was like, this is it.
Interesting. I mean, after all these years of doing it, it just never ceases to amaze me how often you just, like, you've shown them and shown them and shown them and shown them. And then you walk into one house and you turn around and you're like, okay, this is their house.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I get it. Like, I remember walking in my house and it was like, I'm home.
Yeah.
That was 16 years ago. Here I am.
23 years
We're
ago
our
for
own
me.
worst clients. You need to buy and sell a lot more than that.
Awesome. Well, that we just wanted to talk to you about real estate, just as a way to help you build generational wealth. And if you have any other questions, put them in the comments. We would love to hear what you think about using real estate as that forced savings account.
Live the American dream and help your family, your children, or whatever organization you believe in, help them to have that dream too. I mean, I think that's what's beautiful. And if you get to live in a gorgeous house that you love, I mean, it's kind of, I don't really sit around and love my stocks.
Right.
I love my stocks, but I don't love my stocks, and you love your house. So I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Get real.
See you next week.